Hello, Garstor here, and welcome to 2017. This is my first video of the year, and it's going to be the fourth and final video in the Unwrapping a Human Being series. So let's take stock of where we're currently at. We have finished unwrapping the Make Human female mesh, and we still have some distortion. Ideally, we take the time to clean this up, but in the interest of actually completing this series, I'm not going to spend any more time trying to fix these problem areas, but clearly there's some issues here. One of the nice things about UV layout is that it does let you experiment very easily. As another example, I'm really not happy with these seams around the feet. They can definitely be done a lot better. But that will be an experiment I leave for you, the viewers, if you care to build a female mesh out with the Make Human program. At any rate, let's jump over to the UV view. So here's where we've got everything flattened, and it's been flattened across 3 UV tiles. If you recall, when we started, the primary concern that I had with the Make Human UV mesh was that the limbs, the legs and the arms and the body were all attached into one large UV island, and the face, although that was separated, was also part of the same UV space. And having a single UV space can be quite beneficial. It certainly makes texturing a heck of a lot easier, but sometimes you want to have a lot more resolution, and I was mentioning, the face especially is an example of that, where you want to get a lot of fine detail in there, and so you might want that to be on its own UV space. Now, one thing I'm going to do before we get much further into this is demonstrate moving around the meshes and manipulating them. You can do this with very coarse manual adjustments with the spacebar and your mouse buttons. So spacebar and the middle mouse button allows you to translate and move around. Spacebar and the left mouse button allows you to rotate. And the one I really haven't used, but spacebar and right mouse button allows you to scale your mesh. So I'm just going to hit undo on that. Now that's all well and good, depending on the number of UV islands that you have. You can probably get by with just those controls. But if you want something a little more finer grained, we have the Move, Scale, Rotate menu. So we activate this menu by clicking on a UV island to select it. So it turns green. If we click off, it unselects. And if we don't select anything, these menu items are going to act on the entire collection. So generally you want to pick something to manipulate one island at a time. Let's use the move command here, and we'll change this 0 to a 1. And if we click the move button, you'll see it moves a very large amount over to the other tile here. We can hit the invert button, and you'll notice that it puts a -1 in there, so we can click move again and undo what we just did. So 1 is far too coarsely grained, so let's do 0.1, and now it moves much more finely tuned than before. And of course we can just keep modifying that as necessary. So 0.1 moves even more gently, a little more gradual there. So make that as small or as large as you need. Now it was moving off in this direction, but we can have it move in other directions by using these cardinal compass directions. So if we hit N for north, it's now going to move up by zero point 0.1, and of course west moves it over towards the left by zero point 0.1. So again, that's just a little more finely grained adjustments than you can get with your mouse. But speaking of the mouse, we're not finished with that just yet. These three green buttons down here, and they actually are buttons, correspond to your mouse buttons. So the left mouse button, the middle mouse button, and the right mouse button. So I mentioned the space bar and the right mouse button allows you to rescale. And if you don't want to do that, if you don't want to make sure you never do that by accident, if we click on that button, it's now gray. And now space, and you can see right down here in the menu, scale has been disabled in the move scale rotate panel. So I can never accidentally press space and middle mouse button and change the size of my mesh. Likewise, if I don't want to move or rotate with my mouse button, I can turn these off as well. I can turn them all off, in fact. And then I would have to be limited to doing all my adjustments with the menu options here. So I am actually going to have just the move and rotate on, and I will leave scale off. This is moving in the U direction, and this would move in the V direction. So if we had 0.1 in each of these, it moves in U and V. But again, that can be overridden by these cardinal compass directions. We can rotate as well. So let's have a 1 degree of rotation. And if we hit the rotate button, you can see it slowly rotates the mesh. The pivot point by default is the UV origin. So that's the 0 values down here in this corner. And we can adjust that, and we can change so that the pivot point is the middle of the selected shell. So now it rotates in place, which is probably what you'd expect it to do in the first place. If we change it to tile, the pivot point becomes the center of the current UV tile. And we can just adjust this up or down as necessary, and enter manual numbers if you prefer. Well, now I've gone and I've adjusted this. It's kind of off kilter here. We have the Align to feature. So I'm going to click Align to Vertical, and it just brings that mesh back into position so that it's basically vertical. If we did Align to Axes, it will take the average of all of the polygons in the UV island and adjust the positioning so that it is basically the average of all of those in the U and V directions. So when I do that, you can see it nudges it off vertical, and that's probably because this particular mesh is wrapping around the back. So we've got something front facing and off to the sides and off to the back and things like that. And so this is the position it chooses for that. In this case, I want vertical. And so there we go, we've got that. And you can see I've introduced a whole bunch more distortion because I was playing around with the scale, the right mouse button and the space bar. But that brings us to the scaling options. So if you open up an OBJ file in UV layout and it already has UVs created in some other program, and UV layout calculates and and senses that it actually has some distortions in it, we can actually rescale the UVs, the existing UVs. And so that's what these buttons are going to be doing here. We can click on this and we can rescale in the U, and we can click on it again and rescale in the V, and it looks like it didn't really do anything. So we're back to where we should be, but rescaling it with the ampersand, we'll do both at the same time, U and V. So now we are ready to actually start packing these. But our problem is our UV islands are quite a bit smaller than their respective UV space. So there's really not using this space efficiently. And that's where the fit to square feature comes in. So these are 5 buttons along here. So they fit to square, U, ampersand, pipe, and V all rescale and resize in a fashion designed to fill the UV square as much as possible. So if we click on a single mesh like this, what the U button will do is it will resize the mesh, not just in the U direction, it will resize in both U and V. So that's a little bit confusing, but it will resize in both directions in such a way as to the width, i.e. the U direction of the UV island, fitting into the space. Likewise, V will also resize in both directions, not just the V, but it will resize in such a way that the UV island fits vertically. So they're both proportionally scaling. It's just a matter of which edge fits first, basically. The pipe character is going to resize and just fit the space as best as possible. So this is the one I use most often. The ampersand is actually going to rescale unequally. So everything else is rescaling equally, but not this one. So I don't have a use for this myself. At some point, there probably will be a certain model that this might actually come in handy. But for the time being, I'm going to stick with just using this one right here. So if we click that, bam, it pops up and it fills the space as efficiently as possible. But you'll notice the rest of our UV islands went red in distortion. So the distortion maps of the blue and the red are proportional to the entire model. So we've just made our torso UV island much larger in relation to everything else. So all of this has gone red. They're all smaller than they should be with respect to this mesh here. And you'll see the same thing down here where we cut out the nipples as well to help this mesh flatten a little easier, and they're also red. So these are much too small compared to the rest of this. So what does this actually look like? If we switch back to the 3D view, we can see we've got our usual appearance here showing the distortion colors, and as you expect, everything's gone red in these other areas. But we can do a lot more in this view than just examine our cuts and our distortion. If we press the T key, it will actually cycle through UV test patterns, and we can press the plus and the minus keys to adjust the scale of this. And so what we want to look for is we want these to be as square as possible. And you can see they're actually getting a little stretched. And over here where we've got the red distortion, they're getting, really stretched, but they're also, kind of becoming more, diamond shaped as well as they get pulled in directions that they really shouldn't be. So that all comes with, getting your UV flattening as clean as possible. But notice the rest of the mesh here where it's smaller. These squares are much smaller than these squares. So that's telling us that we've got a greater texture density here, and we can actually get more detail on our torso mesh than we can on the other meshes. We can press T again, and we get a different pattern this time. And pressing T a third time cycles back to just the coloration distortion pattern. But I like to use this one as well, since we get not only the square grid, we also get these numbers, and that kind of gives us an additional visual clue as to how things are distorting and what we might do to fix them. You can load your own UV test pattern. If we go to the About UV Layout menu and the Preferences here, I've already got it open, we have this Map button. And that's currently has some question marks because I haven't got one loaded. But if you have a preferred UV test pattern that you want to use, you can click the map button and load it up in here. And then you can cycle through that with these other textures. So in addition to the plain checkerboard pattern or the numeric pattern, pressing T one more time would bring you up your preferred test pattern there that you loaded. And then lastly, one more time we get back to this discoloration. But obviously we have to fix this. This is not ideal. So my apologies here. I had to make a video cut and record a new piece of this tutorial. My original recording kind of ran off the rails there a little bit, so I want to improve on that. So here's where we left off. We've used the Fit to Square buttons in order to get our torso texture filling the UV space a lot more efficiently, along with the face texture here. When we expanded the size of the face, everything else has gone red because they are now, relative to the face mesh, all these other UV islands are far too small, and so they've got the red distortion on them. What we can do is click a UV island and use this local button. And when we click off of that, we see we've got the blue and red distortion pattern colors back. And we're basically telling UV layout, I understand that there is distortion on this UV island. It's too small in this case, but I accept that fact. I actually want this size of UV island, and the distortion does not matter to me. So now we're treating both the face and the torso as the quote-unquote correct size. But again, they are actually, the rest of the meshes here are too small by comparison. Now we still have the back of the head, and that's quite a bit small, but there's not a lot of detail here. We are expecting this to be covered by hair. But what we can do is use the scale feature, and we'll just scale it up a little bit manually. So going up by 10%, that moves it over here. Let's try it another 10%, and then let's move it back. Does it still fit? Yes, it still fits into the space there, so that's great. So we made it a little bit larger, but still, far too small compared to the rest of it. We do need to expand the size of the ears. We don't want them to stay this small, since they are a fairly prominent feature, of course. Whoops. Let's try to get the ear. Okay, we can't get the ears. Let's do this another way. Let's move that over here. And we'll manually move that back. There we go. I think it's a little bit over the edge. No, not quite. Nope, it is there. So this is exactly where we would actually use our move here, since using the mouse is going to be probably a little too problematic. So let's just zoom in on this one piece and nudge this southward. There we go. Yep, we're inside the tile now. And we're still inside the tile here. No, we are not. Okay. Let's run the fit to square again. Okay, so fit to square is a very, very tight fit, but it looks like it's done the trick. Now, we do not want any overlapping UV islands, so we're going to move these meshes off to the side here, and now we'll be able to bring our earlobes back. Now, we may not be able to scale up the earlobes to match the scale of the head. Ideally, we should, but let's see what we can do here. If we zoom in and scale, we're probably going to want to scale a little faster than that. Let's try 1.5. And when we do scale, it seems to want to fly off as well. So that's kind of annoying. It's still showing up as red. The scale with the shell, let's see if that changes anything. There we go. Okay, I thought these pivot buttons only related to the rotate, but actually they do relate to the scale as well. So we can actually scale this in place. So that's great. Okay, now it's too big. So now we actually want to take this down a little bit. There we go. And then that's not too bad. Let's see if we can do the same. So we went up by 1.5. And then that was too large, and we went down. By 0.9. There we go. So it looks like the ears are going to be slightly larger than they should be, but again, that's not too bad here, I think. And our head texture, let's just see how much larger we can make it. Just try to fit it in this tiny space that's left. That should do the trick, I think. There we go. And as I mentioned, we don't care about the eye sockets or the mouth bag here. Now the limbs and the hands. hands and the feet. I'm not sure how much we can get out of this. If we did the fit to square, I don't think we've got enough UV space to actually put all these in here. So we're going to do this manually, and we'll just scale this up a little bit. Let's try another one. So that is, we'll do the same for the shins. Scale those up twice. And let's see if we can manage to pack these into. Let's pull that away. We'll get rid of all of these. Well, by get rid of, I mean move, just so they're not in our way. There we go. And we'll try to position these textures. And this is what I was worried about. We're going to get an overlap here. So this is probably not the best placement. And we might want to let UV layout do its thing. I mean, we can try this manually. If you think you can do it faster by hand, by all means give that a shot. But I'm thinking we're not going to get that here. So let's just start bringing all these back into place. There we go. Just a little bit of and now we'll let UV layout do its thing. I'm going to pause the recording at this point, and I'll let this chug away at the best quality. And I'm not going to turn on the rotate because I don't really want it adjusting all of these things. I want to keep the face vertical. I want to keep the torso vertical. I know that the thighs and the shins are vertical here. So this is the sort of layout, the direction I want them staying in. So I don't want to rotate. But I am going to obviously keep lock all to tile so that we keep these shells on their respective tiles, and we'll see what kind of layout we get with UV layouts algorithm. So I'll hit pause and I'll be back. Alright, this did not take very long at all, just a few seconds actually, which was quite surprising to me. But it's not a nice, neat layout. I'm happy with most of it, but I'm not real happy with how the limbs and the hands and feet are kind of all over the place here. I'm pretty sure we can improve on this ourselves. So I'm going to do a little bit of manual adjustment here. Let's just get these up here. There's lots of empty space up this way. zoom in and get all these hard to reach shells. There we go. And these guys. Let's see. Yeah, we'll temporarily have them off tile for a minute. Oh, we're still selected. That's actually something that kind of annoys me about UV layout, is it does keep selections around. I'm just doing a single left mouse click and it keeps both selected. So you have to remember to click off the island somewhere in a blank space to deselect. Okay, so moving this down here, we're going to get more overlap. Yeah, there might not be a easier manual way to do this. We can either leave it with UV Layout's original plan, or this would be another point where we might want to reconsider how we've done our cuts. So I mentioned earlier, I really am not happy with the feet. I think they can be laid out a lot better and cut more efficiently, and they may give us better UV islands that will actually pack a little more efficiently. So let's actually just return to letting UV layout repack all of this. So since it will only take a few minutes, just double check everything, lock all to tile, show the bleeds of 2, best, 4K, pack all, and it's done. Okay, so we're going to wrap up this video. I'm just going to spend a little bit of time here. We need to make a few more adjustments just to improve the overall size of all the textures here. So we corrected the earlobes. Let's correct those nipples as well. So we're going to scale those up. Okay, one more. Okay, there's still a little bit. One more. Okay, now they're starting to turn blue a little bit, so they're a little bit too large now. But they are in line with the size of the rest of the body, actually. So our ears are here. Let's just bring them closer. There, we did it again. Bring them a little closer together. And we'll do one final check over here. And we'll use the T key. There, that's what I thought. So here's another good reason for using the number pattern and a UV test pattern. Is it's also very easy to tell the direction that the shell is laying in. And the ears have been rotated 90 degrees, or at least this one has. It looks like, yep, this one has as well. So we can go back and adjust those. So just rotate that around. Oh, about there, I think. And we'll go take another look. Oh, now they're upside down. Oh, the other one isn't. Which one is which? That's where we can click to select, and it's this one here. So we need to rotate that around 180 degrees. There we go. All right, that's pretty good. That's pretty good, and we'll leave this as is. Check things out one more time. Just how they're all looking. Okay, so we're actually getting more resolution since these two UV islands, well, they're upside down, but they're also larger than they should be compared to the rest of the mesh. But everything else is actually looking pretty darn good. So that leaves me with just one last little thing to talk about, and that is the smooth button here. So we've mentioned how we've got greater resolution here between the face and the torso, and between the torso and the arms. If we wanted to weld the arms, the UV islands that represent the arms, back onto the torso, we certainly still can do that, but we're going to have this texture clash here. It's going to be really obvious. And the smooth button actually tries to average out the differences along the seam, and so it kind of makes this transition from a higher res texture to a lower res texture a little more, a little easier on the eyes. So that's a pretty useful feature. I have not used it personally. Probably going to play around with this a little bit more after the end of this video. I'll do all that off of camera, and I'll eventually finish up this model completely and maybe clean up the rest of the distortion. But I think that's going to end the series for now. I hope you found it really useful and interesting. I hope you learned a lot. And if you've got any further questions about UV layout, let me know. I've got more videos in mind, probably different subjects though. There's a lot more features in here to talk about. So it's a pretty extensive program. Thanks a lot.